Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night, in that absolute silence where the only sound is the rhythm of your own breathing, and suddenly felt a heavy, cold realization settle in your chest? It is not a panic attack, nor a sudden fright, but rather a quiet, undeniable truth that whispers to you from the dark corners of the room. This, right here, is not forever. I am speaking to you from that precise hour, sitting in a chair that has shaped itself to my body over the years, looking out at a street lamp that flickers with the same hesitation I feel inside. It is the vantage point of the middle years, where the hill we have been climbing levels off just enough for us to see the horizon, and for the first time, notice that the sun is beginning its slow descent. You might ask yourself, why now? Why does this shadow grow longer just as the light inside seems brightest? Do you ever feel like an invisible clock has started ticking louder, drowning out the trivial noise of daily life, making you question if you are merely existing or truly living? We spend our youth sprinting toward the future, eager to arrive, but when we finally get there, we find ourselves looking back over our shoulders, paralyzed by a strange, aching nostalgia for moments that just happened. This isn't a story about fear, though your heart might race when you think about it. It is a confession about awareness, about the moment the fog lifts and you realize that the scarcity of your days is exactly what gives them their unbearable weight and their blinding, terrifying beauty. He is at that specific longitude of life, somewhere between 45 and 60, where the body begins to whisper its limitations while the mind shouts its expanding clarity. He is a man who wakes before the alarm, knowing the exact creak of the floorboards under his feet, moving through a house that has memorized his habits. He needs reading glasses now to decipher the world he spent decades trying to understand. A small surrender to biology that frustrates him more than he admits. His mind feels like a vast, well-ordered library, richer and more cataloged than ever before. Yet his knees ache when he stands to reach the top shelf. He brews his coffee with ritualistic precision, not just for the caffeine, but for the anchor it provides in a day that feels like it is slipping through his fingers like dry, fine sand. The environment around him mirrors this internal twilight. His home is comfortable but shadowed, filled with objects that have quietly outlasted their original intensity. Books read years ago, photographs of people who have drifted away or changed entirely. The light in the room always seems to be that of a late Sunday afternoon, a golden but fading glow that illuminates dust motes dancing in the air. When he catches his reflection in the hallway mirror, there is a jarring, silent disconnect, a glitch in the matrix of his self-perception. The face staring back is weathered, marked by gravity and time, but the consciousness behind those eyes feels barely 20 years old. It is the cruelest paradox he faces. His internal operating system has finally reached its peak sophistication, understanding the code of life, just as the hardware begins to show signs of obsolescence. This deep awareness creates a subtle, invisible wound, a fissure through which the cold draft of reality enters. He finds himself pausing in the middle of completely ordinary moments, watching the steam rise from a teapot or listening to the rain tap against the window, and feeling a sudden, piercing pang of loss for something he still holds in his hands. He is mourning the present moment before it has even become the past, gripping the now so tightly that his knuckles turn white. It is a preemptive nostalgia, a grief for the living, born from the realization that he is fully awake in a burning house. He sits in his worn leather chair, surrounded by the safety of his walls. Yet he feels completely exposed, skinned alive by the sheer, overwhelming realization that every tick of the clock is a door closing softly, never to be opened again. It begins with the treacherous acceleration of the calendar, a phenomenon that feels less like physics and more like a personal betrayal. He notices that the weeks have started to dissolve into one another, turning from distinct chapters into a blurred, rushing stream. He remembers how a single summer afternoon in childhood felt like an entire epoch, endless and sprawling. But now, seasons change before he has even adjusted his wardrobe. He stands in the grocery store aisle, staring at a carton of milk, and is struck by the expiration date. It seems impossibly distant, yet he knows it will arrive in the blink of an eye. This compression of time is not just an observation, it is a physical sensation, a vertigo that hits him when he realizes that the someday he projected all his dreams onto is no longer a vast open territory, but a narrowing path he is already walking on. This heightened awareness creates an invisible wall between him and the rest of the world, a glass partition of lucidity that separates him from the carefree. He sits at a dinner party, surrounded by laughter and the clinking of silverware, listening to friends discuss renovations or office politics, and he feels like an alien observer sent to study a species that believes it is immortal. He nods and smiles, playing his part in the social theater, but internally he is screaming in silence at the absurdity of it all. How can they worry about the weather when the very fabric of their existence is fraying? He feels a profound, aching envy for their ability to be distracted, to live in the shallows of the moment without sensing the deep, dark ocean beneath. His own depth has become a burden. He is drowning in a sea of meaning, while everyone else is content to float on the surface. The tension tightens as he confronts the cruelest irony of his condition. The peak of his mental capacity coincides perfectly with the realization of its expiration. He looks at the complexity of his own mind, the vast network of connections, the emotional intelligence, the hard-won wisdom that allows him to navigate life with a grace he lacked in his youth. He finally understands the intricate machinery of human relationships. He knows how to forgive, how to listen, how to truly see another person. He has spent decades building this internal cathedral, brick by brick, experience by experience, only to realize that the lease is running out just as the construction is finished. The fear is not just of dying, but of the immense waste of data. The terror that this sophisticated, unique consciousness, which took a lifetime to refine, is destined to simply switch off like a lamp in an empty room. He tries to outrun these thoughts with noise and motion, filling his schedule with obligations that act as sandbags against the rising tide. He keeps the radio on in the car, scrolls through screens until his eyes burn, and exhausted himself with tasks that masquerade as purpose. But the silence is patient. It waits for him in the gaps between thoughts, in the pause after he turns off the engine, in the heavy quiet of 3 a.m. He realizes that this is not a depression to be medicated, but a structural reality of having a high-functioning mind. His consciousness has expanded so much that it has touched the boundaries of its own container. He can no longer pretend he doesn't see the exit sign. The anxiety he feels is the friction of his soul rubbing against the limits of time, a spark generated by the desperate, clawing need to make sense of the journey before the destination is reached. The breaking point arrives not with a bang, but with a quiet discovery tucked inside an old hardcover book. He finds a photograph of himself from 30 years ago, a snapshot of a young man laughing on a beach, his skin smooth and bronzed, his eyes bright with the arrogant assumption of eternity. He remembers that day vividly, the smell of salt, the cold drink in his hand. But he also remembers the person inhabiting that body, anxious about trivial things, desperate for approval, completely blind to the miracle of his own breath. He stares at that young stranger and waits for the expected wave of envy to wash over him, the desperate desire to trade places. But the wave never comes. Instead, a shocking tectonic realization cracks the foundation of his despair. That young man was asleep. He was physically immortal, perhaps, but he was spiritually comatose, walking through a paradise he couldn't see because he thought he had forever to look at it. This is the shattering moment of truth, the paradox that finally brings him to his knees in the dim light of his study. He realizes that the agonizing awareness of death he has been fighting is not a curse to be cured, but the ultimate lens through which life must be viewed. Without the sharp, terrifying frame of mortality, the picture of his existence had no focus. It was just a sprawl of endless colors bleeding into gray. The pain he feels now, this sharp, vibrating anxiety about the end, is actually the sensation of his soul waking up completely. He understands that he cannot have the depth of this ocean without the danger of drowning. To wish for the ignorance of his youth would be to wish for a life without texture, a flat existence where nothing matters, because everything is guaranteed. The fear isn't robbing him of joy, it is distilling it into its purest, most potent form. A quiet sob escapes him, a sound not of sorrow, but of overwhelming relief, like a dam breaking inside his chest. He accepts the terrible, beautiful bargain of being fully human. To feel the true preciousness of life, you must continuously feel the terror of losing it. The gold is only valuable because it is rare. His time is only sacred because it is running out. He looks at the fading light in the room and finally stops trying to hold it back, letting the shadows lengthen. He sees that his complex, heavy consciousness is not a glitch in the system, but the whole point of the program. The heartbreak of finitude is the price of admission for the privilege of truly seeing the world. He isn't losing a battle against time. He is finally understanding the rules of the game, and for the first time, the silence doesn't feel empty, but pregnant with meaning. The frantic energy of resistance begins to drain away, replaced by a stillness that feels like the calm after a violent storm. It is not that the clock has stopped ticking. The sound is still there, distinct and rhythmic, but it no longer sounds like a countdown to an execution. Instead, it sounds like a heartbeat, steady and reassuring. He realizes that for years he has been swimming upstream, exhausting himself in a futile attempt to hold back the river of time, gasping for air and swallowing water in his panic. Now he simply turns over on his back. He decides to float. The current is still strong, and it is still taking him toward the destination he cannot change, but the struggle is over. In this surrender, he finds a strange, unexpected buoyancy. He isn't conquering death. He is merely ceasing to let the fear of it conquer the remaining territory of his life. With this new internal truce, the texture of his daily reality undergoes a subtle but profound chemical change. The mundane moments he used to rush through, the bitter taste of morning coffee, the hum of traffic, the sensation of clean sheets against tired skin, suddenly vibrate with a specific high-definition intensity. He looks at the people in his life not as permanent fixtures, but as temporary miracles, fragile constellations of atoms held together for a brief cosmic second. This is the gift that the consciousness of death delivers. It strips away the numbness of routine. He realizes that boredom is a luxury for the immortal. For him, every second is a non-renewable resource. He stops hoarding his affection and his attention for a later that isn't promised, choosing instead to spend it lavishly on the now. The anxiety doesn't disappear completely, but it transforms from a paralyzing fog into a fierce, protective presence. This is not a happy ending in the traditional sense. There are no fireworks or choirs of angels, only the quiet dignity of facing the truth without blinking. He walks through his house, with a lighter step, carrying his mortality not as a heavy chain, but as a lantern. It illuminates the corners of his existence that he used to take for granted, casting long, beautiful shadows that give depth and contrast to his experience. He understands now that the sadness he feels when he thinks about the end is actually a measurement of his love for the beginning and the middle. He has moved from the panic of the victim to the composure of the witness. He is no longer a man trying to escape the theater before the movie ends. He is a man determined to watch every single frame until the screen goes black, grateful just to have been in the audience. To be haunted by the passage of time is not a malfunction of your mind, but the ultimate proof of its triumph. It signifies that you have finally loved the world deeply enough to mourn its eventual absence, and that your consciousness has grown wide enough to encompass the entire arc of the story. Do not mistake this heaviness for despair. It is simply the gravity of a life that has gathered true meaning. The shadow that follows you is not trying to darken your path, but to define it, providing the necessary contrast that makes the light of your remaining days burn with a brilliance you could never perceive when you were young and blind. You have arrived at the difficult, beautiful summit of understanding that to be fully alive is to be constantly, gracefully letting go. So, the next time the silence wakes you in the dead of night, do not rush to fill it with distraction. Sit with it. Feel the pulse in your wrist, that steady, stubborn drumbeat that has marched you through every joy and every sorrow up to this very second. It is a finite rhythm, yes, but it is yours, and it is beating right now. We are all just travelers watching the same sunset from different windows, united by the bittersweet knowledge that the show does not last forever. But while the screen is still lit, while the music is still playing, there is nowhere else you need to be. Breathe it in deep. The dark is not the end. It is merely the backdrop that allows the stars to finally be seen.